All right, so let's jump right into a pretty major development that's happening in the legal world.
Okay.
And we're talking about a case.
Okay.
It's a Supreme Court case
Mm-hmm.
called Mallory v. Norfolk Southern Railway Co.
Hmm.
And it's making a lot of waves
Yes.
for businesses that operate all across the country.
Yeah. I think what was really fascinating about this case is it's really revisiting this whole idea of where a company can be sued,
Mm-hmm.
especially, when they have operations in multiple states.
Right,
It's
yeah.
like a tug of war between state power and corporate reach.
It is. And for anyone listening who maybe isn't a lawyer,
Right.
this whole, like, where can you be sued thing,
Yeah.
it might sound a little bit kind of abstract.
Yeah.
But it really boils down to this thing called personal jurisdiction,
Mm-hmm.
which basically means, like, figuring out which court actually has the authority to hear a case.
Exactly. And it's about fairness. Like,
Great.
ensuring that a company isn't dragged into a court that has no real connection to the lawsuit.
Yeah.
Or the parties involved.
Yeah, and that's really the question at the heart of this whole Mallory v. Norfolk Southern case.
Mhm.
So, like, can a state actually force a company to defend itself in its courts
Right.
just because the company does business there, even if the actual issue, happens somewhere else entirely?
Exactly. So in this case, we
Okay.
have Robert Mallory, a former freight car mechanic
Okay.
who worked for Norfolk Southern Railway.
Okay.
And he's alleging that he developed cancer
Mm-hmm.
as a result of being exposed to carcinogens on the job.
Now, here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Neither Mallory nor Norfolk Southern are based in Pennsylvania,
Right.
and the alleged harm didn't occur there either.
Mm-hmm.
So why on earth is this playing out in a Pennsylvania court?
Well, it's because Pennsylvania has a law that says if a company does business within its borders,
Okay.
they consent to be sued there regardless of where the actual problem took place.
Wow.
So Mallory's legal team is using that as the basis for their case.
So Pennsylvania is basically saying, hey, if you want to profit here, you better agree to play by our rules,
Exactly.
which includes, facing our courts.
That's essentially it. And Mallory argues that Norfolk Southern has a huge presence in Pennsylvania.
Right.
They have over 2,000 miles of track and numerous facilities.
Oh.
So in his view, that level of business activity makes them subject to Pennsylvania's jurisdiction.
But wouldn't that mean that a company could be sued anywhere? It has even a small presence.
Mm.
Like, I mean, what's stopping someone from suing a company in a state where they just have, like, a tiny sales office or, a handful of employees?
That's exactly the concern that Norfolk Southern raised.
Okay.
They're saying this Pennsylvania law violates their right to due process.
Mm-hmm.
They're arguing that being sued in a state with little connection to the case is fundamentally unfair.
So it's really a clash of perspectives here.
It is.
You had the state's interest in protecting its residents,
Mm-hmm.
holding companies accountable.
Right.
And then on the other hand, you have the company's right to due process and, not be subjected to lawsuits in random locations.
And the Supreme Court had to weigh these competing interests.
Yeah.
And in a 5-4 decision, they sided with Mallory.
Wow. A 5-4 decision. That's pretty close.
Yeah, it was a close one, they felt.
They didn't exactly reach, like, a unanimous agreement on this one?
Not at all. No. They revived a precedent
Okay.
from a 1917 case, Pennsylvania Fire Inns Co.,
Wow.
which upheld a similar law. And they basically said, if you want to do business in a state, you accept their rules,
Mm-hmm.
including being sued there. However, this decision
Yeah.
is rooted in a very specific interpretation of the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment.
Right.
Which basically ensures fairness in legal proceedings. And as you mentioned, not all the justices agreed with this interpretation.
Yeah, so how does this ruling square with this whole minimum contacts idea that usually governs jurisdiction?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the bar for where you can be sued has suddenly gotten a lot lower.
That's a great question, and it goes to the heart of the dissent's concerns.
Yeah.
Justice Barrett, who wrote the dissenting opinion, pointed out that this decision might open the door to something called forum shopping,
Okay.
which basically means plaintiffs could choose to sue in states with laws that they believe are more favorable to their case,
Got it.
even if those states have very little connection to the actual issue.
So instead of focusing on where the problem actually happened,
Right.
it kind of becomes about finding the most advantageous legal battleground.
Exactly.
That seems very complicated.
It definitely adds a layer of complexity to this whole issue of jurisdiction.
Right.
And it brings us to another really fascinating point in this case.
Yeah.
Justice Alito, while concurring with the majority, also suggested that this Pennsylvania law
Yeah.
might be vulnerable to future challenges based on laws governing interstate commerce.
So even though the Supreme Court sided with Mallory in this case,
Mm.
the legal battle might not be over yet.
Exactly. Justice Alito's opinion leaves the door open for future legal challenges, which could further redefine how companies navigate the complexities of doing business across state lines.
This is already so much to unpack.
I know, right?
And we haven't even gotten to like what this all means
Right.
for everyday people and businesses.
Yeah, that's the real crux of the matter, and it's where things get really interesting,
Okay,
even for those who might not be following every legal nuance.
got it.
Yeah.
All right, so
Yeah.
okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, this ruling could really change the way businesses operate,
Yeah.
especially those that work across state lines.
It definitely has the potential to shake things up.
Mhm.
Imagine companies being sued in any state where they have, like, even a minimal presence,
Right.
regardless of where the actual issue happened.
Yeah, that seems like that would just create a lot of uncertainty
Yeah,
and risk for businesses.
exactly. It could lead to what some legal experts are calling litigation tourism,
Okay.
where plaintiffs strategically choose to file lawsuits in state
Right.
with laws that might be more favorable to them,
Right.
even if those states have little connection to the case itself.
So instead of like seeking justice where the harm occurred,
Yeah,
it becomes more about finding the most advantageous legal playing field.
exactly.
That doesn't seem very fair.
That's a valid point, and it's a concern that many businesses share.
Mm-hmm.
This uncertainty could make companies think twice
Yeah.
about expanding into new states or even like maintaining operations in states where they have a limited presence.
What about specific industries?
Yeah.
Are there any that you think might be particularly vulnerable?
Well, think about industries
So,
with a large nationwide footprint like
oh, yeah.
e-commerce platforms,
Right.
tech companies,
Right.
pharmaceutical companies.
Right.
These businesses often interact with customers all across the country,
Yeah.
which could potentially expose them to lawsuits in a much wider range of states.
So a company that sells products online, for example,
Right.
they could be sued in any state where they have customers,
Potentially, yeah.
even if they don't have any physical presence there.
That's a possibility, and it's something businesses are going to have to grapple with.
Yeah.
They may need to reevaluate their risk management strategies and think about new ways to protect themselves
Yeah.
from potential lawsuits.
It just sounds like a legal headache, honestly,
Yeah,
especially for smaller businesses
yeah.
that might not have the resources to deal with all these complexities.
It's definitely a challenge, and it highlights the importance of seeking legal counsel
Right.
to understand the implications of this ruling and how it might affect their specific business operations.
So we've talked a lot about the potential downsides for businesses,
Right.
but are there any potential upsides to this ruling?
Yeah.
Could it actually benefit consumers in any way?
That's a great question, and it's important to consider both sides of the coin.
Right.
Some argue that this decision could actually empower consumers
Okay.
by giving them more options to hold corporations accountable.
Interesting. So if a company knows they can be sued in more locations, they might be more inclined to act responsibly
Potentially, yes.
and avoid practices that could harm consumers.
Precisely, it could create a stronger incentive for companies to prioritize ethical behavior
Okay.
and consumer protection.
Hmm.
Also, for consumers who might have been deterred from pursuing legal action
Right.
because of the cost and the inconvenience of suing a company in a distant state,
Right.
this ruling could provide more accessible avenues for seeking justice.
That sounds like it could potentially level the playing field a little bit.
It's certainly possible. Of course, the actual impact of this ruling will unfold over time as courts across the country grapple with its implications
Right, yeah.
and businesses adjust their strategies.
It's fascinating how a single Supreme Court case can have such a ripple effect,
It is.
touching so many different aspects of our lives.
Absolutely. It
Hmm.
really underscores the power of the judiciary
Yeah.
to shape the legal landscape and influence the way we live and do business.
Yeah, it really makes you realize that, like, the law isn't just some kind of abstract concept, you know?
Right.
It has real-world consequences that impact all of us.
Absolutely. And in the case of Mallory v. Norfolk Southern, I mean, we're really seeing how a single ruling
Yeah.
can send these shockwaves through the business world and beyond.
So as we kind of wrap up a deep dive into this case, what are some of the key takeaways that our listeners should really keep in mind?
Well, I think first and foremost, this case really highlights the evolving nature of personal jurisdiction,
Mm-hmm.
especially in a world where businesses operate across state lines.
Right.
This traditional notion of minimum contacts is
Okay.
being redefined, and companies really need to be aware
Yeah.
of this potential for expanded liability.
That's like the rules of the game are changing,
Exactly.
and businesses need to adapt like really quickly
Yeah.
to kind of stay ahead of the curve.
To stay ahead of the curve, absolutely. And second, I think this case really underscores the importance of legal strategy.
Yeah.
Companies need to carefully consider where they conduct business,
Mm-hmm.
how they structure their operations,
Right.
what steps they can take to really mitigate the risk of lawsuits
Yeah.
in these unfavorable jurisdictions.
It sounds like companies might need to become a lot more proactive in managing their legal exposure.
That's certainly a prudent approach. And finally,
Okay.
I think this case raises some really fundamental questions
Yeah.
about fairness and accountability in our legal system.
Right.
Is it really fair
Yeah.
to subject companies to lawsuits in states where they just have a minimal presence?
Right.
Or does this create these opportunities for forum shopping
Mm-hmm.
and just frivolous lawsuits?
Yeah, those are some big questions,
They are.
and I don't think there are any easy answers.
There are no. It's a complex issue with really valid arguments on both sides. And ultimately,
Yeah.
the impact of this ruling will really depend on how courts interpret it
Mm-hmm.
and apply it in future cases.
Well, I have a feeling this isn't the last we're going to hear
No,
about personal jurisdiction and the challenges of interstate commerce.
not at all.
This is a topic that's likely to keep generating debate
Mm-hmm.
and legal challenges, I think, for many years to come.
Absolutely.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much complexity can really be packed into a single Supreme Court case.
It's a testament to the intricacies of the law and how it really intersects with every aspect of our society.
Well, on that note, we'll have to wrap things up.
Okay.
Huge thanks to you for guiding us through this case. It's been a real eye-opener.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Always happy to delve into these legal intricacies.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Yes.
We encourage you to continue exploring this topic
Yeah.
and consider the broader implications of Mallory v. Norfolk Southern.
Absolutely.
After all, knowledge is power.
It is.
And the more we understand about the law, the better equipped we are to navigate the complexities of our world.
Exactly.
So until next time, keep those minds curious and stay engaged.
And keep diving deep.
And keep diving deep.
Yeah.